So Games Workshop have made some moves to address the crazy strength of the Admech Codex. Let's see what's changed and what kind of impact it will have. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel, where we're all about getting the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. If you've been in any way keeping up with the competitive 40k scene over the last couple of months, the Admech Codex has been making a very big splash. Codex creep does tend to be a thing with Games Workshop, new books tend to be stronger, but in particular both Skitarii and the Admech just felt so strong that they were downright oppressive on all the other factions in the game. When Chapter Approved came out, Skitarii were toned down a small amount, a few points nerfed to key units, and a couple of key combos gone. But largely in terms of tournament results, Admech have just been taking events by storm, and it's a really common sight to see 2 or 3 of the top 5 lists in every event being Adeptus Mechanicus. Their units are just incredibly cheap for what they do, and they have some of the best firepower synergy in all of Warhammer 40k. I am glad that Games Workshop has decided to address it sooner rather than later. It really does make the game a bit stale when one faction is just clearly stronger than many of the others. Warhammer's certainly never been amazingly well balanced, but with some of the recent codexes they have reached levels worse than they have been for quite some time. Unsurprisingly, the main nerfs come to the Admech Ironstriders and to the big blobs of Skitarii, the units that basically make a lot of the rest of the codex kind of redundant just because of how much better they are than them. The Ironstrider Ballistari are cheap, tough and very fast, with some of the best firepower in all of Warhammer 40k. The way that Games Workshop decided to nerf them was for them to lose core, which for some reason they were given, despite being strong already before the codex, being given loads of datasheet buffs when the decks came out, and no other vehicle in the codex getting the core keyword. Losing core really is quite a big nerf. You can't take advantage of the really cheap martial rerolls for just the 45 points, as these things could easily have rerolls 1 to hit and wound with the martial and his relic, so losing access to those is probably for the best. You can't put any holy order buffs on them, such as say the one that gave them +1 strength to make them strength 8 autocannons, or anything similar. They'll lose access to the various Skitarii warlord traits. They were ones where you could have a character anywhere on the table and you could just broadcast 1 buff to a given unit, and these were really quite powerful buffs. You could make 1 unit fall back and shoot, for example, which is really pretty crazy on a disturbingly strong gunline unit. They'll also lose access to the Infoslave Skull as well. That's the Admech version of Auspex scan, where if an enemy unit sets up nearby, they can just gun them off the table for 2 CP. Again, pretty much for the best that they don't have access to that. Getting another full round of shooting from a unit of these for 2 command points is absolutely crazy, and it could be an absolute death sentence to anyone who made the mistake of setting up too close. Despite the loss of all these synergies though, they do remain incredibly highly efficient firepower. For 75 points, getting access to 2 damage D3+3 las cannons is great all by itself, and if you weren't spamming these to death and you were just running a few small units of them, I'm not really sure that you've really lost all that much. Say for example, if you were running Mars, just say 1 or 2 of these in a small unit, getting access to their hit reroll and maybe their stacking buffs and canticles, that'll still basically work the same. I think those small units will still work very well in a Data Horde Forge world too. There's the one that gives you a 6+ feel no pain, which these guys like, and also gives you 4 rerolls to hit with Cognis weapons within half range, which is really easy on the 48-inch range autocannons and las cannons. That still seems incredibly strong to me, and they don't really need character support with that. They might just have a little bit less insurance against being locked up in close combat. I do kind of wonder whether a points nerf might have been better to address these, or even losing core and a points nerf. Still, just looking at the Admech units myself now, I still feel that these really do outcompete the other gunline options they have. I'd still want to be taking las cannon and autocannon Ironstriders over things say like Scorpius tanks, just their sheer firepower still seems better to me. In addition, as some collateral damage, the Sindonian Dragoons also lost core. They're the other type of Ironstrider, the more melee focused ones. To be honest, these ones really didn't seem to be a problem, not all that many people were running them. I think it's purely a change because they are basically the same model, and it would be very weird for one of the models to have core when one didn't. So sadly a small nerf to them, even though they weren't seeing all that much play. Then for the second part of the FAQ, we have 4 nerfs to the Skitarii blobs. Typically the thing that was most done with them was big 20-man blobs, deep striking with Lucius. They can be ridiculously tough to shift with a bunch of different layered buffs, and also spectacular damage output on top of that, between the synergies that they could get and also their incredibly strong stratagems. Fortunately, at least some of that has been toned down. First up, the Lucius Dogma has seen a very small nerf. That's the one that gives you a +1 save against any damage 1 attacks, and it's a godsend for any standard Skitarii, as damage 1 attacks tend to be the efficient way to kill them, and it really protects them very well from any incidental combats they get into, say where it's troops trying to outfight troops. The only small tweak to this is that it doesn't stack with light cover anymore, which you could apply to one of the Admech units with a Warlord trait, or of course get them in some actual cover in game. I guess this does tone down one piece in the puzzle in the big Lucius almost invincible Skitarii blob, but I can't say it's really one of the stronger pieces. As we'll discuss in just a second, you can still very much get 2+ save Skitarii in the open, which is pretty crazy. The next one is a nerf to leadership shenanigans for the Skitarii, and its acquisition at any cost, a 1 command point stratagem that allows you to auto-pass morale if you're within 6 inches of an objective marker. With Games Workshop trying to make leadership a bit more of a thing in 9th edition, lots of auto-pass mechanics have gone away, and to be honest this felt like a bit of a step back from that, giving access to a very easy auto-pass that you could use all game long. That stratagem remains unchanged into its function, but you can only use it once per game now. Overall, I do think that that's a good change. It will mean that you don't just make the easy calculation of whether you want to keep the last few Skitarii alive and pay 1 command point if you do. It's now going to be a resource you're going to need to ration, along with the 2 CP auto pass from the core book, and I think not being able to spam this all game long is certainly a good change. Definitely will help morale be just that little bit more meaningful. Finally, we've got 2 nerfs to the damage dealing strategies of the Skitarii, both of which were just frankly very silly undercosted for how much value they gave. First up, Enriched Rounds has seen a double nerf. This was the single most broken one in my opinion, where Skitarii Vanguard only had to pay 1 command point to auto-wound any enemy non-vehicles on 4s with their guns. It basically meant, provided they weren't targeting a vehicle target, a max unit of 20 of these would be near enough guaranteed to stack 40 wounds on their opponent, and often at AP-1 as well due to a Tech Priest Manipulus being nearby. It just made the toughness characteristic completely meaningless, and it meant that one fairly cheap unit was going to almost half kill Mortarion in a single round of shooting, which is pretty dumb for a single command point. This was basically nerfed in the exact way that I wanted it to be. Now the enriched rounds only goes off on 5s to hit, not 4s, so basically you're only getting 2/3 of the wounds that you would have been before, and it also costs 2 command points if you use it in a squad with 11 models or more. It still means that a big 20 blob squad is going to be spitting out basically 20 auto wounds on their targets. That's still going to average 5 dead Space Marines, or 10 wounds to a monstrous creature with a 3+ armor save, but I think that's far more in line with how much they cost, and you'll have to pay 2 command points for the stratagem, instead of just a measly 1. I feel like they've kind of got this one right now. It's still usable, but honestly I don't think it's going to be spammed anywhere near as much. Finally, and perhaps an even bigger nerf, was to Galvanic Volley Fire, the stratagem for the Rangers. Rangers have been massively dialed up in the new codex, along with many other things. Their rifles went to heavy 2 shots rather than rapid fire 1, and if you use this 2 command point stratagem on them, then they went to rapid fire 2 weapons rather than heavy 2. Essentially this meant your blob of Rangers will be spitting out 80 shots at 15-inch range, rather than the normal 40 that they would get, and they could also ignore move and shoot penalties when they did that. It was another very silly strong shooting buff on a unit that was already good. Now the stratagem has seen a pretty massive nerf. Rather than changing them to rapid fire 2 weapons, it makes them heavy 3 weapons each from heavy 2. Firstly, that's just plainly less shots. You're getting an extra 20 shots rather than extra 40 shots, so it's kind of half of as effective as it was before. And on top of that, it doesn't stop the weapons from being heavy anymore, so you still will be taking the penalty when you move or shoot, or when you teleport them into battle via Lucius. Rather than getting something like 60 or 70 hits on the enemy, you're now going to be getting more like 30 or so if the unit's moving, though I guess you can apply those at a slightly longer range. I really don't think that we're going to be seeing Deep Strike Rangers anywhere near as much, but it could still be solid for large blobs of Rangers camping. If you don't move, or if you have a move and shoot benefit, you are still getting a very decent buff to your firepower. Again, I think that was a sensible change. The stratagem's not going to be used anywhere near as much, but it certainly reins in the silly levels of firepower that Rangers had before. Those are all the changes, so I guess the question is whether they went far enough, and will they actually be bringing Admech down more into line with some of the other codexes, rather than being one of the best by far. I certainly don't think that Admech aren't going to be top tier after this. I still think they absolutely will be. but maybe they might just have brought them down enough to be more in line with some of the other recent codexes, like Orc Sisters and Dracari perhaps. I'm really not sure that they've hurt Ironstriders as much as they think they might have. They're still ridiculously efficient firepower and get to be even stronger in certain Forge worlds, and their firepower is still arguably the best in the entire game of 40k. The Skitarii blobs do hit significantly less hard now, but they haven't really done anything about the absolute super durability Skitarii you can make through Lucius. Just with one unit and a Tech Priest Manipulus buffing character, you can still have a 2+ save in the open, transhuman physiology for only being able to be wounded on 4s and ignoring AP-1 and AP-2. I guess they won't be able to auto-pass morale quite as easily as previously, so I suppose that's something. I guess they'll still do damage, but that stratagem has been significantly toned down. Otherwise, completely unscathed, we have Fusiliers who will still be winging around bombing things into oblivion. Still some very cheap and effective buffing characters, such as the Manipulus and the Skitarii Marshal, and they chose not to change anything with the army-wide special rules, the Doctriner Imperatives and Canticles of the Omnissiah. Overall, I do think they've done quite well. All the changes that they've made are sensible ones, and I guess they can always make more if Admech continue to be oppressive. I do wonder whether maybe just some very small points nerfs on the Skitarii and the Ironstriders might have been sensible in addition to these. I still feel Admech would be decently strong and maybe have a bit more internal balance within the codex, with perhaps something like 9-point Skitarii and 80-point Ironstriders with las cannons. I guess we'll have to wait and see though. Knowing Games Workshop, maybe we'll just be complaining about OP Thousand Suns and Grey Knights in a month or two, so maybe nerfing Admech further isn't the biggest priority. Anyway, let me know what you think down in the comments below. Are the changes good? Are they bad? Did they go far enough? Did they go too far? Look forward to hearing your opinions. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where I'll certainly keep the 40k content coming, with new videos out near enough every day. Finally, if you are enjoying regularly, I would just like to mention that the channel has a Patreon page, which is how I can afford to keep on making videos like this quite so regularly, as it does take a fair amount of time and effort. If you are enjoying a lot, any support is enormously appreciated. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next for the channel, and automatic entry to the regular prize giveaways, with a chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, then the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.